Welcome. It is Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz. Ben Ferguson with you. Senator, I got to say, there are certain days where it's just really extra fun to be an American. And watching us take on the cartels and watching us blow up a boat filled with drugs after the president warned you don't want to keep doing this by Venezuela, and they did it anyway. God bless America. This is Trump doctrine FAFO 101.
Well, let me say it is a bad time to be a narco-terrorist. It is a bad time to be an enemy of America. And we saw President Trump take out a boat off the waters of Venezuela. 11 Tren de Aragua gang members were aboard that boat. It was carrying narcotics. We're going to break that down. We're going to talk about what the impact is going to be on Venezuela, on Mexico, on narco-terrorism around the world. This follows on with the last podcast we did and my trip recently to Mexico, calling on Mexico to team up with us in fighting narco-terrorism. What happened in Venezuela shows one way or another we are going to defend the United States of America. We're also going to talk about legislation that I introduced this week, legislation to protect D.C., the crime wave we've seen in D.C., the murder wave we've seen in D.C. President Trump has acted decisively to combat that crime. But a major cause of that crime is an ordinance that D.C. passed in 2022, lessening the penalties for violent crime. I filed legislation to repeal that 2022 law. We're going to talk about that as well. And finally, breaking news, Donald J. Trump is alive. That news causes great pain, great hysteria, great mourning for Democrats, for the left-wing media, all of whom were celebrating his death. We're going to talk about just how ridiculous Democrats in the media were in the last few days as they were eager to put President Trump in the cemetery, and how sad that is to see people openly rooting for the death of the president.
Yeah, if you thought the Democratic Party could be any less more soulless, well, here's another example of it. You can't make it up. All right, I want to tell you real quick about a really cool note I got. I got a note from someone that was 77 years old. And it was a lady, and she said, Mr. Ferguson, I listen to Verdict each and every day you do your podcast. My grandson turned me on to the show. I've never bought anything off of radio advertising, but I decided to buy Crockett Coffee because I love coffee, and I decided, why not? You are right. It is amazing. Just want to say thank you from a senior citizen who is now waking up drinking the same coffee you guys drink. Godspeed. That is the best maybe email I've gotten this year. And if you haven't tried Crockett Coffee, you got to. It is small batch coffee perfected on purpose by experts who love the taste of amazing coffee. Now, this is small batch, so they do it and they roast it in small batches so that you get premium coffee with every cup. Now, my two friends, my fellow patriots, Buck Sexton and Clay Travis, they actually started this company because they understood that in the coffee business, there are a lot of like woke sellout cups of coffee that you can buy. And they said, look, we're never going to sell out. You can choose between fresh ground, whole bean, or K-cup. You choose. And if you're even interested in the mushroom coffee and the positive benefits that come with enjoying that each day, Crockett Coffee is now producing that as well, and it's amazing. Now, they keep it simple. Dark roast, mild roast, or light roast. They got a decaf version and the mushroom organic blend. You just get small batch premium coffee the way it's supposed to be made. And here's the other thing. A portion of every purchase goes to support the Tunnel to Towers Foundation because the people at Crockett Coffee pledge to never, ever forget. Now, let me save you money so you can try it. All right, here you go. Go to CrockettCoffee.com. Use my name, Ben. You're going to get 20% off your first order. That's CrockettCoffee.com. Use my name, Ben, as your promo code. You'll get 20% off, and you'll wake up to the best cup of coffee of your life. All right, so I got to ask you, Senator, I was actually asked this question today, and they said, hold on a second. Senator Cruz goes down to Latin America. He's dealing with and talking about the gangs. He's talking about cartels. He's warning don't mess with America. And then all of a sudden we see President Trump take out this boat and send it out to the world. And they're asking me about the timing. Are you just this good or did you know something that we didn't know?
Yeah, I'll confess we really are that good. Or look, put it more simply. Put it more simply. I know Donald Trump. I know who he is. My message to the Mexican government this past week was, I think there is a 0% chance, not a 5% chance, not a 10% chance, a 0% chance that 4 years will pass without President Trump acting decisively to take out the Mexican drug cartels. And the choice that I think the Mexican government has is, do they want the U.S. to do so unilaterally? Or do they want to work with us? Do they want to be our partners? And I told them, listen, we would much rather work with you. It's a much better situation that we work collaboratively. But I got to say, they got fairly worked up. They said, no, you have to respect our sovereignty. I said, listen, if these were just local thugs, if these were pickpockets that were robbing people in the streets of Mexico City, it wouldn't be our problem. But these Mexican cartels are murdering Americans. And so the commander-in-chief has an obligation to act against them. And I have to say, what just happened is a powerful illustration of it. Now, what happened? In Venezuela, video was put out showing the U.S. military taking out a drug boat and taking it out. And the video shows the boat going along, and then, boom, the explosion. 11 suspected Tren de Aragua narco-terrorists were on board the boat. Here's what Fox News has reported. President Donald Trump shared dramatic video Tuesday of a U.S. military strike that blew apart a Venezuelan drug boat in the southern Caribbean, leaving nearly a dozen suspected Tren de Aragua narco-terrorists dead. Quote, over the last few minutes, we literally shot out a boat, a drug-carrying boat, Trump said during a news conference in the Oval Office. A lot of drugs in that boat, and you'll be seeing that, and you'll be reading about that. It just happened moments ago. The strike resulted in 11 terrorists killed in action, Trump wrote in a social media post. No U.S. forces were harmed in the strike. Please let this serve as a notice to anybody even thinking about bringing drugs into the United States of America. Beware. Beware is all caps. Thank you for your attention to the matter. And it looks like 9 exclamation marks. Now, I got to say, 9 exclamation marks for 11 terrorists who blew up. That's a really powerful message. I got to say, if you are a narco-terrorist right now, if you're MS-13, if you're Tren de Aragua, if you're any of the cartels that are bringing drugs into this country, you got to be looking around. You got to be looking up going, is there a drone up in the sky right now? Are they going to take me out next? And that's the kind of decisive leadership that we see in this commander-in-chief, that in 4 years, ask yourself, why did Joe Biden not do anything to stop the narco-terrorists who were murdering Americans, who were flooding drugs into this country, who were producing a massive death toll? More than 100,000 people died last year of drug overdoses. 70% of that was fentanyl. What did Joe Biden do? Well, it's actually worse than that. Not only did he do nothing, Ben, he was actively opening our border and releasing the terrorists and the smugglers and the human traffickers and the drug traffickers who were engaged in this assault on the U.S. And so this is it was a powerful moment.
Let's just remind people. Yeah. Let's also just remind people of what you just said and how real that was. They actually sent to Texas forklifts that lifted up the barbed wire barriers that were put down.
Yeah.
To let illegal immigrants into the United States of
Texas.
America. Like, if there's any... Yes.
So Texas is fighting to keep out human traffickers and drug traffickers, and the Biden administration, instead of saying, thank you, Texas, let's secure our border, they went and sued Texas and said, damn it, no, we need more human traffickers and drug traffickers in America. They didn't say that, but that's effectively what they said.
Yeah, it's exactly the message that they sent. I also think one of the interesting things about this video, and if you haven't seen it, it's everywhere on the internet. I'm sure it's on Senator on your Twitter as well. Go there and look at it. But it was also, and I think this is part of the message.
And by the way, for folks that are watching the video, for folks who are watching this on YouTube or Rumble, we're playing the video right now. So if you're watching this visually, you can get this as an audio pod, but you can also watch it visually. So you can watch the video as we're talking about it.
Yeah, and I think as you talk about it or see this video, one of the things that I think is very interesting about the messaging, this boat had no idea this was about to happen. It wasn't flying through the water. It wasn't zigzagging. It didn't know it was under attack.
Yeah.
It was just out there doing its thing, and then it just got blown up. The psychological message that's going to have to send to anybody else thinking about getting in a boat tonight, this morning, tomorrow is, you don't know when you're going to die, but we know where you are, and you will not be able to outrun us because you won't even know we're there. That is a powerful message, and I think that's part of what the president was trying to accomplish.
Amen. Carlos Jimenez from Florida said that the vessel belonged to the Cartel of the Suns, and what he said on X was, "This is going swimmingly. We continue." And the uncertainty of it reminds me of a couple of things. It reminds me, number one, of the Iranian IRGC, the terrorists, who one after the other were taken out, and they didn't know what hit them. And it made them incredibly uncertain. When Israel, we were joking, like the IRGC, when the Ayatollah would appoint someone as the head of the IRGC, and Israel would take them out. And then they named somebody else the head of the IRGC. The next day, Israel would take them out. And by like the third or fourth time, like if the Ayatollah called you and said, "Hey, Ben, you want to be the head of the IRGC?" What would you say?
No, hell no.
I'm sorry, new number. Who dis? No speak English. Like literally, you got that job, and your life expectancy was about 24 hours. You'd point, no. I think he'd make a much better head of the IRGC. The guy next to me, let's kill him. And the other example it reminded me of, again in the Middle East, was Hezbollah. And Israel, when they carried out the pager operation, where these pagers that Hezbollah gave to their senior terrorist exploded and killed terrorists, wounded terrorists, and then, like, I think it was 48 hours later, they had a second operation with walkie-talkies, and the walkie-talkies exploded. And after 48 hours of all of these exploding, imagine for a second you're a Hezbollah terrorist, and the phone rings, and you've got to be like, whoa, what the hell? Like, the in terrorem effect of knowing any moment could be your last. You don't realize it's coming. It could come from a drone strike in the air. It could come from a pager exploding. That is a powerful deterrent. And this ship just cruising along, I guarantee you the next drug runner that is cruising along in a boat is going to look up and wonder, okay, is there a missile about to explode me into the smithereens?
Let's also talk about the message that was sent, not just to the terrorists, the narco-terrorists, but also to the message it just sent to Mexico and to the leader in Venezuela, Maduro, who's got a big bounty on his head. Last I checked, I think it's $50 million.
Yep, $50 million. So this week, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, is traveling to Mexico City, and it's right after I just came from Mexico City. I conveyed to the government, accept our offer, work with our military, take out the cartels. Claudia Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico, said, "No, we reject your offer." Here's what Marco said on Twitter today. He said, quote, "The president has been very clear that he's going to use the full power of America and the full might of the United States to take on and eradicate these drug cartels, no matter where they're operating from, and no matter how long they've been able to act with impunity. Those days are over." And he went on to say, TDA is a designated foreign terrorist organization operating under the control of Nicolas Maduro, responsible for mass murder, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, and acts of violence and terror across the United States and the Western Hemisphere. Now, that is exactly true of the Mexican drug cartels as well. Every word he said. And so for Maduro, you're right, there's a $50 million bounty. If you're Maduro, you've got to feel really nervous right now that there is some ambitious general, or maybe not a general, maybe just a colonel or major in your army who says, you know what, $50 million sounds pretty good. I sure would like to live a life of leisure on an island. Maduro's got to be incredibly nervous. But the cartels, if the Mexican cartel leaders have to understand, they are next. And if you are a government official in Mexico, you got to make a choice. Now, by the way, Ben, it's possible the Mexican government may make the decision, you know what? We understand that Trump is going to take out the cartels, but we just can't take the heat domestically for domestic political reasons of being part of that. So we would rather be oblivious and not be a part of it so we can just yell, "Damn Yankee imperialist," which is what they would yell if they didn't participate, because they may decide That's better domestic politics. Well, if they decide that, that's fine. I understand that. The message I tried to convey to them is listen, you're a friend and ally. We would like to cooperate with you. The analogy I used was Colombia with Plan Colombia, where we worked with the Colombian government. We took out the cartels in Colombia. This was under George W. Bush. That's the example that is the preferable example. But if the Mexican government is going to bury their head in the sand like an ostrich, that does not relieve the commander-in-chief of the obligation of protecting Americans. And I think this week off the shores of Venezuela demonstrated he will act decisively to protect this country.
If you've ever listened to the show before, you know I'm a big advocate for the Second Amendment, and I've shared on numerous occasions how carrying a firearm literally saved my life from a gang-related attack. But many of you out there may not feel comfortable carrying a firearm. Maybe you have a loved one that's just not comfortable. They need a way to protect themselves. And that's why I want you to know about Byrna launchers. I have them, and I've given them to many family members. Byrna is a handheld pistol that fires both kinetic rounds and chemical irritants to separate you from an attacker. And I'm here with Josh Sherrard from Byrna to tell us how carrying a Byrna when taking a rideshare could be a really good idea. Josh, what has your team learned about safety and ride sharing?
So recently a story has broke about rideshare, including Byrna and Lyft, about the fact that they haven't been reporting nearly as many attacks between drivers and riders as previously believed. And unfortunately, some of these are as serious as sexual assaults, major assaults that are putting people in the hospital. So what we know is that there has to be something done in order to improve the safety from drivers and riders on both ends. And unfortunately, Uber doesn't allow guns to be carried by riders in their cars. So we're looking at trying to find better ways to improve that safety so that when you're riding in a rideshare, you understand that you're going to get from point A to point B and be able to do it safely.
And unfortunately, a lot of the rideshare policies out there are not allowing riders to carry weapons inside the vehicle, but a Byrna is something you can use.
Absolutely. There's explicitly stated in their policy that they do not allow riders to carry firearms in their cars. However, those policies say nothing about other less lethal weapons like Byrna launchers, which means that Byrna is a great solution for making sure that you can stay safe in these ride shares.
Look, I got one. I carry one. My wife has one as well, many family members. And if you want more information on how you and your family member can protect yourselves with a Byrna launcher, go to Byrna, BYRNA.com. Again, that's Byrna, BYRNA.com, Byrna.com right now. Senator, I want to ask you one final question on this, and that is, how quickly do you think this could ratchet up? I don't believe this is a one and done. I think this is the beginning, not the end. I don't believe that President Trump is bluffing. I don't believe the Secretary of State in going down to Mexico is a bluff either. The president has made it clear, whether it's hitting a terrorist on a tarmac in Iraq, whether it's going after the Iran nuclear sites, whether it's going after ISIS and wiping them out, or Al-Qaeda, it doesn't matter. And when he said, I'm going to name you terrorist organizations, declare that that's what you are, that was the beginning. Today was the beginning of the action. Do you have any reason to believe that this is not going to be something that we're going to be talking about for days and weeks ahead?
Yeah, no, I think we're going to see this over and over again. I want to play the clip from when President Trump described the action in Venezuela. Give a listen to the president talking about it.
When you come out and when you leave the room, you'll see that we just, over the last few minutes, literally shot out a boat, a drug-carrying boat, a lot of drugs in that boat. And you'll be seeing that and you'll be reading about that. It just happened moments ago, and our great general, head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who's been so incredible, including what took place in Iran, knocking out potential nuclear power for a long time to come. I think within a month they would have had it if we didn't do what we did. But he gave us a little bit of a briefing, and you'll see. And there's more where that came from. We have a lot of drugs pouring into our country, coming in for a long time. And we just, these came out of Venezuela and coming out very heavily from Venezuela. A lot of things are coming out of Venezuela. So we took it out, and you'll get to see that after this meeting is over.
I mean, the president there just seems so calm and collected, like, hey, I warned you, I told you, now it's happening. This is an FAFO moment yet again.
Well, as the president said, there's more where that came from. I think those were words that were freighted with import. And this really does key into my meeting last week with the governments of El Salvador and Panama, but especially Mexico. I described how when I met with the Mexican defense minister, he began the meeting by arguing at considerable length, the cartels are not terrorist organizations. And I got to say, I found that a very odd thing for him to argue, and obviously I disagreed. And just as an objective matter, whether he thinks they're terrorist organizations or not, the United States has designated them as terrorist organizations. And he said they're not terrorist organizations because terrorist organizations have a political agenda and they spread fear and terrify the civilian population. Now, by the way, the cartels murder thousands, they kidnap thousands, they intimidate, they spread fear. By any rational definition, they're a terrorist organization. Now, they're not motivated by politics. They're not the IRA trying to free Ireland. They're not the PLO trying to overturn, or Hamas trying to overturn the Israeli government. So it's not political motivations, but it is money and power and control that motivate them. But their means is terrorism. The way they exercise power is through murder and rampant violence and narcotics and through spreading fear and terror. And their consequences, designating the cartels as terrorist organizations, is not just a paperwork notation, okay, which box do you check on the paper? It means that we have an authorization. Look, we take out terrorists all over the world. And being a terrorist organization means you are now a target. It means if you're a terrorist organization, look in the sky, because there could be a drone about to light you up any second. And I want to take a minute to step back, because when it comes to foreign policy right now, the debate in this country is often simplified to the point of absurd. Many people put foreign policy as a bipolar situation. You are either an interventionist, in which case you want to invade every country on earth, you always want to send the Marines, or you're an isolationist and you want to do nothing and withdraw from the world and never engage. And I have long believed both of those poles are wrong. I think the vast majority of the American people disagree with the interventionist and disagree with the isolationist. And yet almost all of foreign policy in politics and the media is treated as if those are the only two choices. I have long considered myself a third point on the triangle. I consider myself a non-interventionist hawk. And here's the point I want to make. I think Donald Trump is as well. I agree with President Trump's foreign policy. America first is not interventionist, but it is not isolationist. And there are a whole bunch of people in politics. On Twitter, it seems there's an army devoted to claiming America first is isolationist. And let me just say the facts are to the contrary. Donald Trump is not an isolationist, despite every effort Tucker Carlson tries to make. And Tucker every day goes on and on and on about how Trump is an isolationist, and he just ignores reality. Because, look, in the first term, Donald Trump, when he came into office, ISIS had a caliphate the size of the state of Indiana. Trump came in, obliterated ISIS, destroyed their caliphate, took them out entirely. Donald Trump took out General Soleimani. He took out al-Baghdadi. Those are not the actions of an isolationist. The second term, Trump began by bombing the hell out of the Houthis, who were attacking U.S. shipping vessels and other shipping vessels in the Suez Canal. That's not the act of an isolationist. He then launched an incredibly important, a critical bombing run on the Iranian nuclear facilities. That most definitely was not the actions of an isolationist. And right now today, taking out these narco-terrorists in Venezuela, that is not the act of an isolationist. Now understand, the fact that President Trump is willing to act and act militarily to take out our enemies does not mean that he's an interventionist. Notice that Trump hasn't invaded any countries. I don't believe he's going to send the Marines into Iran. I don't believe he's going to send the Marines into Venezuela or Mexico. And by the way, I would oppose it if he did. I don't agree with doing that. But there is a big difference between targeted use of force against enemies of America and trying to invade other countries and turn them into democracies. And there's another point I want to make. Many on the left, many Democrats, many in the media, and also many isolationists on the right believe that when you withdraw from the world, that's how you avoid war. I want to make the case that's exactly backwards. Look, Joe Biden was the weakest, most impotent commander-in-chief we have seen since Jimmy Carter. And that weakness, just like Jimmy Carter, it encouraged the radicals in Iran to foment a revolution, to take over the embassy, to take Americans hostage for 444 days. The same was true under Joe Biden. The war in Ukraine was caused because Putin was emboldened. October 7th was caused because Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah were emboldened. If you want to avoid war, I believe, as Ronald Reagan put it in Peace Through Strength, I believe as President Trump puts it in America First. And the way you avoid war is being strong enough that nobody in their right mind wants to mess with you. That's how you avoid war. And I got to say, this action, taking out the terrorists, it's a step in the right direction.
All right, Senator, I want to bring it back home to something. And you talk about cleaning things up. That's what President Trump has said he's going to do with the terrorists and those that are bringing drugs in this country. But he's also doing big things in different cities. And now you have introduced the Clean DC Act. Explain to us what this is.
Well, the principle is very much the same as we were talking about in foreign policy with the terrorists, which is when you react with weakness, the result is domestically you get more and more crime. When you react with weakness abroad, the result is internationally you get more and more terrorism and more enemies attacking. The converse is true. When you react with strength with regard to crime, when you lock up murderers and rapists and child molesters, you get fewer violent crimes. Number one, because of deterrence. Number two, because of prevention. You get the bad guys off the street. In D.C., the murder rate has consistently been one of the highest in the entire country among large cities. It is 27 homicides per 100,000 residents each year. That is higher than Bogota, Colombia. D.C., not only that, but if you look at vehicle theft is 842 per 100,000 residents, which is 3 times the national average. And carjackings have tripled in recent years. I'll tell you, actually, one time I was filming several years ago, I was filming Verdict. It was a little past midnight, and we had our truck parked on the street. I was in the studio filming it. The truck was broken into, and my briefcase was stolen on the streets of D.C. If you look at D.C., which is our nation's capital, you've got elected representatives and staff from all 50 states, from all over the country. We had earlier this year, we had a staffer from the White House, from DOJ, who was violently assaulted in D.C., beaten up by 10 juvenile offenders. We had in recent years, we had a staffer for Rand Paul who was stabbed in the middle of the afternoon on a D.C. street. We had a former official in the first Trump administration who was shot and killed at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, parked in his car on a D.C. street. The violence is out of control. And it was made worse by a 2022 law in the wake of the George Floyd killing and the Black Lives Matter protest, when anti-police fervor was driving the left crazy. The D.C. City Council and the D.C. Mayor came in and they passed a law that lessened the penalties for violent crimes almost entirely across the board. They lessened the penalty for murder. They lessened the penalty for carjacking. They lessened the penalty for violent assault. And the effect, understandably, was those crimes all increased. If you lessen the penalty for violent crime, the crimes increase. And this is the thing that the left doesn't understand. We saw a Democrat congressman, Henry Cuellar from Texas, who was carjacked in his car at about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. He was coming home with his dinner, and he was carjacked outside an apartment building that, if I remember correctly, 5 other congressmen lived in. That's how bad it was. Now, I will tell you, in the past Congress took up legislation to reverse that 2022 law. It passed the House and it passed the Senate, and then Joe Biden vetoed it. Joe Biden decided, all right, we're not going to let this go into effect. Well, I've introduced, again, legislation that is called the Clean DC Act. And the Clean DC Act is very simple. It is designed to repeal the 2022 law lessening the penalty for violent crimes. And The Clean D.C. Act, we're pushing for a vote. I think the House may vote on it as soon as the next week or two. I'll tell you, the Clean D.C. Act, it's supported by the D.C. Police Union. It's supported by the Fraternal Order of the Police. And it's a good opportunity. I think every member of Congress, every Democrat, every House member needs to decide, okay, where do you stand? Do you stand with the violent criminals? Do you stand with the murderers? Do you stand with the rapists? Do you stand with the carjackers? Or do you stand with the citizens of America? That ought to be an easy vote, although sadly I'm going to predict I think an awful lot of Democrats are going to vote with criminals.
Yeah, it really does tell you where the Democrats' mindset is right now, where they can't even agree that criminals should be held accountable. And it also just, I think, tells you about how sinister they are, which brings us to our final story. The idea that because the president wasn't seen like 24/7, totally different than Joe Biden when he was president, by the way, that somehow he was dead was a trend on social media, and Democrats were celebrating it.
No, it really was bizarre. The left was losing their mind because a couple of days President Trump hadn't done a public event, and so suddenly the left, they were so excited. They were so excited that, this means Trump is really sick. He's in the hospital. He's had a stroke. He's dead. You know, Andrew Yang, you remember the Democrat who ran for president? He tweeted out, quote, "I would be pumped to have a president whose physical vitality or mental fitness wasn't an ongoing issue or concern." It's like, what? Where the hell were the Democrats during the last 4 years of Joe Biden? The man was almost publicly in a coma for 4 years. He was drooling and coloring with crayons, and the Democrats are like, nothing to see here. No, it's perfectly fine. Yes, we have a White House staffer we dress as a giant Easter bunny to lead him away to keep him out of trouble, but there's nothing to see here. And I got to say, so today President Trump was asked about this by Peter Doocy, and in fact Peter Doocy asked about the stories that he'd been dead. Listen to the exchange between Peter Doocy and President Trump.
About a big viral social media trend over the weekend. How did you find out over the weekend that you were dead? You see that?
No.
People didn't see it for a couple days. 1.3 million user engagements as of Saturday morning about your demise.
Really? I didn't see that. You know, I have heard, it's sort of crazy, but last week I did numerous news conferences, all successful. They went very well, like this is going very well. And then I didn't do any for 2 days, and they said, there must be something wrong with him. Biden wouldn't do them for months. You wouldn't see him. And nobody ever said there was ever anything wrong with him, and we know he wasn't in the greatest of shape. No, I heard that. I get reports. Now, you knew I did an interview that lasted for about an hour and a half with somebody, and everybody saw that was on one of your competitors. I did numerous shows and also did a number of truths, long truths, I think pretty poignant truths. No, I was very active over the weekend. They also went out to visit some people at the club that I own, pretty nearby on the Potomac River. And no, I've been very active actually over the weekend. I didn't hear that one. That's pretty serious stuff.
I'm glad it's
well, it's fake news. You know, it's just it's so fake. That's why the media has so little credibility. I knew they were saying, like, is he okay? How's he feeling? What's wrong? I said, I just left. And it's also sort of a longer weekend, you know, it's Labor Day weekend. So I would say a lot of people know I was very active this Labor Day. I had heard that, but I didn't hear it to that extent.
I love how the president just trolls the media on this one. Like, yeah, you guys are a bunch of scumbags, and I'm not surprised that this is what you did.
Yeah, no, look, it was absurd. I mean, this president, you can disagree with him on substance. You can disagree with him on style, but the man has enormous energy. I mean, if you look at the first 7 months of this administration, I think there's been no administration in our lifetime that has had more velocity and volume and action. And it has been incredible. And this president, he is going... This weekend, actually, President Trump called me. I talked to him this weekend. He was in great spirits. We were talking
So hold on. You talked to him while he was dead but alive.
Oh,
That's breaking news.
Yeah, and oddly enough, I didn't have a Ouija board. I didn't have to do a seance, and he was kind of... And it was, we were not talking about Are You All Right? He called me on an issue that he and I had been working on, so we had a substantive conversation. You know, today, the president announced that there was going to be a White House address at 2 o'clock. And I got to say, Twitter went crazy with anticipation. And I think people expected them to announce, okay, President Trump is dead. He's entered a permanent vegetative state. He's resigning. Like the left they were beside themselves, but particularly egregious. I want you to listen to Tim Walz. Tim Walz is the governor of Minnesota. He's a weird dude. And you'll remember for like 12 seconds he was Kamala Harris's vice presidential nominee. Give a listen to what Tim Walz had to say about President Trump and his hopes that the president was dead.
You get up in the morning and you doom scroll through things, and although I will say this, the last few days you woke up thinking there might be news. Just saying. There will be news sometime, just so you know, there will be news.
I mean, that's sick, and that's the guy who ran for vice president of the Democratic Party.
Let me say, that is sick, and I have never wished death upon Joe Biden or Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or any of the Democrat leaders. The president of the United States, whether you agree with them or not, what the hell is wrong with these people where they say they wake up every day hoping, please, 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 let me see that he is dead? You know, there used to be a notion, listen, when Barack Obama was president, I disagreed with a lot of the policies that he implemented. I think they did a lot of damage, a lot of harm to this country. But I wish success on him. I wanted America to succeed. We talked about earlier this year President Trump's State of the Union address. I've been to 13 State of the Union addresses. Every single one begins the same way, with the sergeant at arms calling out, "The President of the United States." And 12 of the 13 I've been to, every House member and senator stands and applauds. And that's true whether it's a Democrat or Republican, whether it's your party or the other party, you respect the office. And so when Barack Obama walked onto the floor of the House, I stood and applauded for him. When Joe Biden walked on the floor of the House, I stood and applauded for him. This year, when Trump walked onto the floor, every single Democrat I saw stayed sitting and would not applaud. And there's something really wrong when you are openly cheering for the president of the United States to die, and the people laughing, and I suspect there were reporters there and there were also leftist activists, the people laughing and cheering, there's something just fundamentally wrong about that.
Yeah, it really is. Don't forget, we do this show Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're going to keep you updated on all the biggest breaking news and the stories the media refuses to cover. So hit that subscribe or auto download button wherever you are on social media. And wherever you are, share it, I should say, on social media, and download it wherever you get your podcasts. You can also tell Siri or Alexa, play Verdict with Ted Cruz, and it will do it for you just that easily. And the Senator and I will see you back here in a couple of days.